Captain Elena Voss vanished mid-flight over the Amazon in 2015, her cargo plane disappearing from radar without a distress call or any trace of wreckage. 8 years later, a satellite image revealed her aircraft buried inside a concrete bunker deep in the jungle, intact and hidden. But Elena wasn't in the cockpit. She was 50 miles away in a second bunker, murdered after being forced to fly for the criminals she'd tried to expose. March 15, 2015. The cargo ramp at Simón Bolívar International Airport in Caracas was busy despite the late hour. Elena Voss walked her pre-flight inspection, flashlight beam tracking along the fuselage of her twin-engine Cessna Caravan, 38 years old and still moving like the Air Force pilot she used to be, checking every rivet, every surface, every detail that could mean the difference between landing safely and not landing at all. Her co-pilot Michael Chen stood by the cargo door, clipboard in hand, watching workers load the last of the medical supplies. "You seem distracted tonight," he said. "Everything okay?" Elena forced a smile. "Just tired. Long week." But it was more than that. Something had been bothering her since Tuesday, since she'd flown over that section of protected rainforest and seen the scars in the canopy. Mining equipment, where no mining should be. She'd reported it to authorities, sent her photos to the environmental agency. Maybe that was a mistake. The cargo manifest showed their load: vaccines for a clinic in Manaus, hospital equipment, water purification tablets, standard humanitarian run, the kind Elena had flown 100 times across South America. But 2 hours before departure, there'd been a last-minute addition. 200 pounds of scientific equipment, the paperwork said. No details, no customs inspection, just load it and go. Elena had argued with the dispatcher, but he'd been insistent. "Priority cargo," he'd said. "Direct from the client. You want the job or not?" She wanted the job, needed it. Her small cargo company was barely breaking even, so she signed off on the manifest and tried to ignore the knot in her stomach. Michael climbed into the cockpit beside her. 4-hour flight to Manaus, he said, studying the weather radar. "Storms building over the jungle, but we can route around them." Elena started the engines, ran through her checklist with practiced efficiency. Tower cleared them for takeoff at 11 p.m. The Cessna lifted into the humid night, lights of Caracas falling away below them. Within minutes, there was nothing beneath but darkness and the vast Amazon rainforest stretching to the horizon. Elena's last radio transmission came at 11:45 p.m. Position report: routine, professional, course steady, altitude 10,000 feet, estimated arrival, Manaus, 0300 hours. By midnight, the plane had vanished from radar. No distress call, no emergency beacon, no wreckage ever found. It was as if the jungle had simply opened up and swallowed them whole. The air traffic controller in Manaus, a man named Carlos Mendez, had been working the overnight shift for 12 years. He knew the rhythm of the night flights, the cargo pilots who moved supplies across the Amazon while passengers slept. At midnight, he expected Elena Voss to check in with her position report. Midnight came and went. The radio stayed silent. Carlos tried raising her on the primary frequency. "Cessna, November 725. Papa, Manaus Control, do you copy?" Nothing but static. He switched to the emergency frequency. Tried again. Still nothing. Carlos felt the first flutter of concern in his chest. Pilots didn't just go silent. Even with radio failure, they'd squawk emergency codes on their transponder. But Elena's transponder had simply vanished from his screen 20 minutes ago. By 12:30 a.m., Carlos had called his supervisor. By 1 a.m., they'd activated search and rescue protocols. By 2 a.m., Elena's husband David was being woken up by a phone call in Miami that would change his life forever. "This is the Brazilian Aviation Authority," the voice said in careful English. "We're trying to locate your wife's aircraft. When did you last speak with her?" David sat up in bed, his heart already racing. "Before she left for the airport, around 9 p.m. Venezuela time." "What's wrong? What happened?" "We've lost contact with her plane. We're doing everything we can to establish communication." Lost contact. The words felt impossible. Elena had been flying for 15 years. She'd flown combat missions in Afghanistan, navigated through storms that would ground commercial jets. She didn't just lose contact. David was on a plane to Manaus by dawn. The flight took 8 hours, and every minute felt like drowning. He stared out the window at the endless green canopy below, trying not to imagine Elena down there somewhere, trying not to think about what lost contact really meant. When he arrived at the Aviation Authority office, Carlos Mendez met him with exhausted eyes. "We've had search planes out since first light. Carlos said. Helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, were covering the entire flight corridor. And? Carlos hesitated. Nothing yet. No wreckage, no emergency beacon signal, no sign of the aircraft at all. David stared at the map on the wall, at the vast expanse of green where Elena had vanished. How does a plane just disappear? Carlos had no answer. But in his 12 years of working overnight shifts, he'd learned one terrible truth about the Amazon. When the jungle wanted to hide something, it stayed hidden. Dawn broke over Manaus with the kind of light that should have felt hopeful. Instead, David stood on the tarmac watching search planes take off one by one, each heading into the green hell that had swallowed his wife. The search coordinator, Lieutenant Paulo Santos, from the Brazilian Air Force, spread maps across the hood of his Jeep. "Your wife's last known position was here," he said, tapping a spot over. "Solid rainforest. We're searching a 500-square-mile radius. It's a lot of territory." David stared at the map. 500 square miles of jungle so dense you couldn't see the ground from the air. How do you even spot wreckage in that? We look for breaks in the canopy, burn marks, anything that doesn't belong. Santos's voice was kind but realistic. If the plane went down hard, we'll find debris. If it broke apart, pieces spread out, we'll find something. But they didn't. The first day of searching produced nothing. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the suspected crash zone, observers scanning the endless green with binoculars. Fixed-wing aircraft covered wider areas, looking for any sign of disturbance in the forest. Infrared cameras searched for heat signatures that might indicate survivors or recent fire. Nothing. Not a single piece of metal. Not a scorched tree. Not even a signal from the emergency locator beacon that should have activated automatically on impact. By day 3, David was going out with the search teams himself. He sat in the back of a helicopter, staring down at the canopy passing below, trying to will the jungle to give up its secrets. The forest was so thick in places you couldn't see more than a few feet down through the leaves. Michael Chen's family arrived from California on day 4. His mother stood beside David at the search headquarters, both of them staring at the same maps, the same lack of answers. "Where are our children?" she asked quietly. "How does a plane just vanish?" The investigators were asking the same question. Elena's plane had modern equipment, multiple redundant systems, an emergency beacon designed to survive any crash. The weather that night had been stormy, but nothing Elena couldn't handle. There was no logical reason for the plane to disappear so completely, unless it hadn't crashed at all. Lieutenant Santos pulled David aside on day 7. "We've covered the entire probable crash zone. We've found nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no signal. Either the plane is buried so deep we can't see it, or it's somewhere we're not looking." David felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What are you saying?" Santos met his eyes. "I'm saying maybe your wife didn't crash. Maybe she landed somewhere." David sat in Lieutenant Santos's office that evening, staring at a photo of Elena he'd brought from home. Santos had asked him to explain who his wife really was, not just her flight credentials but the person behind them. "Elena wasn't just experienced," David said quietly. "She was exceptional. 15 years of flying, started in the Air Force right out of college, flew transport missions in Afghanistan, landed cone 130 seconds on dirt strips in the middle of combat zones." Santos made notes. "So, military trained, used to high-pressure situations. More than that. After her service, she could have flown for any major airline. Big salary, easy routes. But Elena wanted to do something that mattered. She started her own cargo company, flew humanitarian missions across South America, medical supplies to remote clinics, disaster relief, vaccine deliveries. The kind of pilot who takes risks?" David shook his head firmly. "Never. That's what I keep trying to tell everyone." Elena was meticulous about safety. She'd cancel flights if the weather looked wrong. She'd turn back mid-route if something felt off. She treated every flight like lives depended on it because usually they did. If stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share in the comments where you're watching from. Santos leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Voss, in my experience, even the best pilots can make mistakes when they're distracted or stressed. Was Elena dealing with anything that might have affected her judgment?" David hesitated. The week before she vanished, Elena had been troubled. She'd flown a route over protected rainforest and seen something that bothered her. "Illegal mining operation," she said. "Heavy equipment, cleared land, all in areas where that's forbidden." She took photos from the cockpit, reported it to environmental authorities. Did she receive any response? Not that she mentioned. But the night before her last flight, she seemed nervous, kept checking her phone, looking out the window like she expected someone. I asked if everything was okay, and she just kissed me and said she loved me. David's voice broke. Elena never said goodbye like that. It felt final, like she knew something might happen. Santos was quiet for a moment. Did your wife have enemies? Anyone who might want to harm her? Elena helped people. She saved lives. Who would want to hurt someone like that? But even as David said it, he remembered Elena's words from that last night. Sometimes doing the right thing makes you inconvenient, she'd said, and inconvenient people have a way of disappearing. The aviation investigation team arrived from Brasilia 3 days after Elena vanished. Lead investigator Maria Rodrigues pulled David into a conference room at the airport, spread documents across the table, and pointed to something that made his blood run cold. Look at this cargo manifest, she said. Medical supplies, vaccines, hospital equipment, all standard items your wife transported regularly. But see this entry here? David leaned closer. The last line showed an edition made 2 hours before takeoff. Scientific equipment, 200 pounds, no detailed description. Maria tapped the paper. This was added at the last minute. No customs inspection, no itemized list of what this equipment actually was. And look at the shipping company. David read the name. Selva Tech Solutions. He'd never heard of it. Neither had we. Maria pulled up her laptop. We searched every business registry in Venezuela and Brazil. Selva Tech Solutions doesn't exist. No company registration, no tax records, no physical address. It's a ghost. David felt his hands start to shake. What does that mean? It means someone used a fake company to put unregistered cargo on your wife's plane without proper documentation. Maria's expression was grim. The dispatcher who approved it claims he received authorization from Elena's company owner. But when we contacted the owner, he said he never approved any last-minute cargo additions. So someone forged the approval? Or coerced it? We're still investigating. Maria showed him another document. But here's what really concerns me. We pulled records for other flights in this region over the past 5 years. We found 6 other small cargo planes that vanished under similar circumstances. All of them had last-minute cargo additions from companies that turned out to be fake. David stared at her. 6 other planes? 6 that we know of. All experienced pilots, all flying humanitarian or commercial cargo routes. All disappeared without a trace. No wreckage ever found. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. You're saying Elena's disappearance wasn't an accident? Maria met his eyes. I'm saying your wife may have been carrying something on that plane that someone didn't want discovered. And when she realized what was happening, when she maybe tried to report it or refuse, they made sure she disappeared. David thought about Elena's nervousness that last week, her comments about inconvenient people disappearing. She knew, he said quietly. She knew something was wrong and she flew anyway because she needed the work. Maria's voice was gentle. Or she flew because they gave her no choice. 6 weeks passed, and the official search for Elena Voss was scaled back. The helicopters stopped flying daily grids. The volunteer pilots returned to their regular routes. Lieutenant Santos kept the case open, but his resources were limited, and the Amazon was vast. The theories came fast, each one trying to explain what seemed unexplainable. Maria Rodrigues believed catastrophic mechanical failure was most likely. The plane could have broken apart mid-air. During the storm, she told David, scattered over miles of jungle. The canopy is so dense, pieces could be buried under vegetation, and we'd never see them from above. But Santos countered that theory. We flew infrared over the entire corridor. Any significant crash would show heat signatures for days. Disturbed earth, burned vegetation. We found nothing. Another investigator suggested pilot error. The weather was bad that night, storms building. Maybe Elena got disoriented, lost altitude, hit the canopy at an angle that didn't leave obvious wreckage. David wanted to throw something. Elena flew combat missions in worse weather than that. She didn't get disoriented. Michael Chen's father had his own theory, one whispered in late-night conversations. What if it was hijacking? What if someone on that plane forced them to land somewhere? But where? There were no airstrips for hundreds of miles along Elena's route. Even if someone forced her to land, the jungle terrain would tear the plane apart. David developed his own idea, born from desperation and too many sleepless nights. What if Elena's still alive somewhere? What if she survived and she's trying to signal but we're not looking in the right place? They investigated because they had to. Search teams expanded their radius, checked for any sign of survivors. Infrared detected nothing human. No smoke signals, no distress markers, no indication anyone was alive down there. By September of 2015, 6 months after Elena vanished, the official conclusion was filed. Aircraft presumed destroyed due to unknown cause. Pilot and co-pilot presumed deceased. Location of wreckage, undetermined. Contributing factors: severe weather, possible mechanical failure, dense jungle terrain preventing recovery. David read the report in his hotel room in Manaus and felt something break inside him. They were giving up, filing Elena away as another statistic, another unsolved disappearance in a region known for swallowing planes. But he couldn't give up. Wouldn't. Because somewhere in those millions of acres of rainforest, Elena's plane was waiting to be found, and David had the rest of his life to search. March of 2016, 1 year after Elena disappeared, David was living in a small apartment in Manaus. He'd quit his architecture job in Miami, burned through most of his savings searching the jungle with local guides, and stopped returning calls from friends who said he needed to move on. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. No subject line, sent from an anonymous encrypted account. David almost deleted it as spam. Instead, he opened it and found a wall of seemingly random characters. Code. It took him 3 days, and help from a former college roommate who worked in cybersecurity to decrypt the message. When the text finally appeared on his screen, David's hands started shaking. Elena didn't crash. She landed. Look for the bunker. That was it. No explanation, no details, no way to respond. The email address was a dead end, routed through servers in 6 different countries. Whoever sent it knew how to stay hidden. David printed the message, stared at it for hours. Look for the bunker. What bunker? The Amazon was thousands of square miles of uncharted jungle. There could be structures from old rubber plantations, abandoned research stations, indigenous settlements. How was he supposed to find one specific bunker? He took the message to Lieutenant Santos, who looked skeptical. This could be from anyone, Mr. Voss. Someone who read about your wife's case and wants to give you false hope. Or worse, wants to lead you into dangerous areas. But what if it's real? What if someone knows what happened to Elena? Santos sighed. Even if this message is legitimate, bunker could mean anything. There are old military installations scattered throughout the Amazon from the Cold War era. Brazil built them in the 1960s. Most were abandoned by the 1980s. They're not on maps, not maintained, often completely overgrown. David felt something shift in his chest. Military bunkers large enough to hide an aircraft? Some of them, yes. They were designed as emergency airstrips and supply depots. But Mr. Voss, searching for abandoned bunkers in unmapped jungle, it's like looking for ghosts. David met his eyes. Then that's what I'll do. I'll look for ghosts until I find her. Santos tried to talk him out of it. So did Maria Rodriguez. So did David's sister, who flew down from Miami to stage an intervention. But David had spent a year with no answers, no closure, no body to bury. Now he had something, a thread to pull. Elena didn't crash. She landed. He was going to find that bunker if it took the rest of his life. David hired 2 local guides in April of 2016. Brothers named João and Marco Silva, who'd grown up in the Amazon, knew the rivers and trails better than any map. They met him at a bar in Manaus, where David spread out military records he'd obtained through a Brazilian historian. These are locations of Cold War bunkers, David explained. Built in the 1960s, when Brazil was worried about communist expansion from Venezuela. Most were abandoned by the 1980s. João studied the documents, his weathered face skeptical. These coordinates are vague. Jungle reclaims everything fast. After 40 years, a bunker could be completely invisible. I need to try, David said. My wife is out there somewhere. Over the next 6 months, they explored 12 possible sites. The work was brutal. Treks that lasted weeks, hiking through terrain so dense they needed machetes to clear paths. Heat that made David's clothes constantly soaked with sweat. Insects that left his skin covered in bites. Nights spent in hammocks listening to sounds he couldn't identify. They found ruins. Concrete foundations overtaken by roots. Metal structures rusted into lace. One bunker had collapsed entirely. The roof caved in. Interior flooded and home to caimans. Another had been taken over by a jaguar and her cubs. João wouldn't let them get close. But none showed signs of recent use. None had clearings that could serve as landing strips. None held any trace of Elena's plane. David learned things he'd never wanted to know. How smugglers used the Amazon's vastness to move drugs and weapons. How illegal logging operations destroyed thousands of acres, leaving scars visible from space. How indigenous tribes sometimes found aircraft wreckage and left it untouched, considering such places cursed. He also learned about the illegal mining operations, small-scale wildcatters who stripped riverbanks for gold, larger corporations that moved in heavy equipment under cover of jungle, extracting rare minerals from protected land. They built temporary airstrips, flew equipment in and minerals out, then vanished before authorities could respond. Marco showed him one such site. The clearing had been hacked from jungle, trees cut and burned, scars in the earth where excavators had torn into the ground, and at one end, a crude runway, just long enough for a small cargo plane. "This is what your wife saw," Marco said quietly. "This is what she reported. These operations, they don't like witnesses." David stared at the devastation. How many sites like this are out there? Hundreds, maybe thousands. The Amazon is too big to patrol effectively. By the time authorities respond, the miners are gone. And the pilots who see them? Marco met his eyes. Some pilots look the other way. Smart ones. The ones who don't, well, planes go missing all the time out here. November of 2018, 3 years after Elena vanished, David received an email that wasn't encrypted or anonymous. The subject line read, "I'm investigating your wife's disappearance. Can we talk?" The sender was Sofia Martinez, an investigative journalist based in Sao Paulo. David had learned to be cautious about people claiming to help, but something about her message felt different, professional, specific. She mentioned details about Elena's case that weren't public knowledge. They met at a cafe in Manaus 2 days later. Sofia was in her early 30s, carrying a laptop bag worn from travel and a notebook filled with handwriting in 3 languages. She ordered coffee, then got straight to business. "I've been researching aircraft disappearances in South America for 5 years, she said, opening her laptop. "It started as a story about drug smuggling routes, but I found a pattern that doesn't fit the cartel model." David leaned forward. "What pattern?" 6 small cargo planes vanished in this region over the past decade. All experienced pilots flying humanitarian or commercial routes. All had last-minute cargo additions from shell companies. All disappeared, without any wreckage ever found. David felt his pulse quicken. Maria Rodriguez mentioned something similar when Elena first went missing. Sofia pulled up a spreadsheet. "I tracked down families of the other pilots. Talked to investigators, obtained flight records, cargo manifests. Every single case has the same signature. Fake shipping companies, unregistered cargo, pilots who vanished completely. You think they're connected?" "I know they're connected." Sofia showed him documents. "I traced the shell companies. Different names, but the same registered agent keeps appearing. A lawyer in Caracas who specializes in setting up untraceable business entities. When I tried to interview him, he refused. 2 weeks later, someone broke into my apartment and stole my laptop." "Did you have backups?" Sofia smiled slightly. "I'm a journalist investigating corporate crime in South America. Everything I have exists in 3 separate encrypted cloud accounts. They got nothing." David studied her face. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" Sofia met his eyes. "I want to find out what happened to these pilots. I want to expose whoever is making them disappear. And I need someone who knows this region, who has resources and motivation. Someone who won't quit. I've been searching for 3 years. I'm not quitting." "Good." Sofia pulled out a folder. "Because I think I know what your wife saw that got her killed. And it's bigger than illegal mining. Much bigger." Sofia spread documents across David's kitchen table over the next week. Bank records, satellite images, corporate filings, witness statements. The picture that emerged made David's stomach turn. The shell companies that added mysterious cargo to Elena's flight all traced back to the same source. A Brazilian mining corporation called Terra Verde Resources. On paper, they had legitimate permits for mineral extraction in designated areas, but Sofia's research showed something else entirely. "Look at these satellite images," she said, pulling up her laptop. "This is protected Amazon territory. No mining allowed, ever. Now look at this same area over a 5-year period." David watched the images cycle through. The first showed unbroken rainforest canopy. Each subsequent year showed new scars, cleared areas, equipment staging grounds, crude roads cut through jungle. By 2015, hundreds of acres had been stripped. "Terra Verde is extracting rare earth minerals," Sofia explained. "Coltan, lithium, elements used in electronics and batteries, worth billions on the global market. They use small aircraft to move equipment in and minerals out, operating at night or during storms when satellites can't see clearly. And Elena flew over one of their sites," David said. "More than that." Sophia showed him Elena's original report to environmental authorities. Your wife didn't just see the mining. She photographed it extensively. GPS coordinates, dates, close-ups of equipment. She provided enough evidence to shut down their entire operation. So they had to silence her. Sophia nodded. I found records of a Terra Verde executive meeting 3 days before Elena's last flight. Minutes mention a witness problem that needed immediate resolution. 2 days later, the fake company Selva Tech Solutions was created. The day after that, 200 pounds of unregistered cargo was added to your wife's flight. David felt rage building in his chest. They put people on her plane, armed men who forced her to land somewhere. That's my theory. Sophia pulled up more documents. I traced equipment purchases by Terra Verde, concrete, construction materials, supplies shipped to coordinates that don't match any of their legitimate operations. They built something out there, David. A place to hide evidence. A bunker, David said quietly, remembering the encrypted message. Sophia met his eyes. I think Elena's plane is in one of Terra Verde's hidden facilities. And I think we can find it. But David, if I'm right about this, we're investigating people who made 6 pilots disappear. People with money, connections, and no conscience. I don't care. Elena deserves justice. Justice might not be possible. Sophia's voice was grim. But truth is. And sometimes truth is enough. January of 2023, 8 years after Elena disappeared, Sophia called David with news that made him drop his coffee mug. I got access to new satellite technology, she said, breathless with excitement. European Space Agency just released high-resolution imaging that can penetrate jungle canopy using synthetic aperture radar. David grabbed his keys. I'm coming over. They spent 3 days in Sophia's apartment scanning areas along Elena's flight path. The technology was remarkable, seeing through vegetation to reveal ground structures invisible to normal satellites. They found old bunkers, abandoned mining sites, indigenous settlements, the hidden geography of the Amazon laid bare. Then, on the 3rd day, Sophia froze the image. David, look at this. The screen showed a geometric anomaly 200 miles southwest of Elena's last known position. A rectangular structure partially buried, covered by decades of vegetation growth. But the edges were too straight, too deliberate to be natural. And nearby, barely visible through the canopy, was a clearing. That's a runway, David said, his heart racing. Sophia zoomed in, enhanced the image. The clearing was overgrown, but the shape was unmistakable. A straight corridor cut through jungle, just wide enough and long enough for a small aircraft. And the structure at one end showed signs of concrete construction. This wasn't on any of the old military records, Sophia said. Someone built this privately, hidden it deliberately. David studied the coordinates. It's in protected indigenous territory. No legal mining, no development allowed, which makes it perfect for illegal operations. Sophia pulled up Terra Verde's equipment purchase records. Look at the dates. They bought heavy construction materials in 2014, shipped to coordinates within 10 miles of this location. The year before, Elena vanished. Sophia nodded. They built this bunker, used it as a base for their illegal mining. When Elena photographed their operations and reported it, they needed to make her disappear. What better place than a facility that doesn't officially exist? David's hands shook as he screenshot the coordinates. After 8 years of searching, of dead ends and false hopes, here it was, a structure large enough to hide an aircraft, in exactly the kind of location that made sense. How do we get there? He asked. Sophia was already pulling up maps. 3-day trek from the nearest river access, difficult terrain, dangerous wildlife, and we'd need permission from indigenous elders to enter their territory. Then we get permission. David looked at her. I'm done searching from the air. I'm done with satellite images and theories. I'm going to that bunker, and I'm finding my wife. February of 2023. David assembled his team in Manaus. Sophia, the 2 Silva brothers who'd guided him for years, and a survival expert named Carlos Diaz, who specialized in indigenous territory navigation. They met with tribal elders from the Yanomami people, explained their mission, showed them photos of Elena. The eldest, a man named Nepeyoma, studied Elena's picture for a long time. We know of this place you seek, he said through a translator. Our hunters avoid it. They say the ground there is cursed, that metal birds sleep in the earth. Metal birds. David's pulse quickened. You've seen aircraft there? Not seen. Heard stories from grandfathers. During the time of the white man's Cold War, flying machines came to the deep forest. Some never left. Napioma granted them permission to cross tribal lands but warned them, 3 days walk from the river, the jungle there is thick, dangerous, many snakes, jaguars, and men with guns sometimes use the old paths. We'll be careful, Sophia promised. They set out on February 10th. The first day was brutal. Hiking through terrain so dense they measured progress in hundreds of meters, not miles. The air was thick enough to chew, humidity making every breath feel like drowning. Insects swarmed constantly. João had to pull 3 leeches off David's legs during their first rest break. Night in the Amazon was worse. Sounds came from every direction, howler monkeys screaming, things moving through underbrush, the constant hum of insects. David lay in his hammock unable to sleep, thinking about Elena somewhere ahead, wondering what he'd find after 8 years. Day 2 brought rain. Not the gentle rain David knew from home, but sheets of water that turned the jungle floor into a river. They had to rope together to avoid getting separated. Marco nearly stepped on a fer-de-lance snake coiled under leaves. The close call shook everyone. By day 3, they were exhausted, soaked, covered in bites and scratches. But Carlos's GPS showed they were close, less than a kilometer to the coordinates. Then João, scouting ahead, called out. He'd found something. A path, overgrown but still visible. Tire tracks preserved in mud under the canopy, protected from erosion by the thick vegetation above. Someone's been here, João said. Not recently, but within the last decade. David felt his heart hammering. They followed the path for another hour. Then the jungle opened slightly and Carlos stopped so suddenly the others nearly ran into him. There, he pointed. Through the trees, barely visible under years of vines and growth, was concrete. A structure built into the hillside, camouflaged perfectly with the forest around it. And nearby, the clearing Sophia had seen on satellite, overgrown now but unmistakable. They'd found the bunker. They approached the bunker slowly, machetes ready, every sense alert. The structure was massive, easily 50 feet wide and twice as long, built into a natural hillside with concrete walls reinforced with steel. Vines covered every surface, trees growing from cracks where roots had found purchase over decades. The entrance was sealed. Recent work too. New concrete filled what had once been a doorway, the material still lighter in color than the surrounding structure. Someone had deliberately tried to hide whatever was inside. This wasn't built in the 1960s, Carlos said, examining the construction. This concrete is modern, poured within the last 20 years, maybe less. Sophia photographed everything, the sealed entrance, the overgrown clearing nearby, the faint remains of runway markers barely visible through vegetation. David walked the perimeter, his hands running over concrete that might hold answers he'd been seeking for 8 years. João found tire marks preserved in a sheltered area near the bunker entrance. Heavy vehicle, he said. And look here. He pointed to gouges in the earth, parallel lines where something had been dragged. The pattern led from the clearing toward the bunker entrance, disappearing at the sealed doorway. They dragged something inside, Marco said quietly. Something heavy. David felt his knees go weak. A plane. They dragged Elena's plane inside and sealed. Pick it up. Sophia was examining the sealed entrance more carefully. We need to break through, see what's inside. Carlos pulled out tools from his pack. Hammer, chisel, crowbar. Not sophisticated but effective. It'll take time. This concrete is thick. They worked in shifts, chipping away at the seal. The sound echoed through the jungle, making David nervous. If anyone was monitoring this area, they'd hear, but they'd come too far to stop now. After 3 hours, they broke through, a hole just large enough to shine a flashlight into the darkness beyond. David's hand shook as he pointed the beam inside. The light revealed a vast interior space, cool air flowing out from the opening. A hangar, built underground to hide aircraft from aerial detection. And there, in the darkness barely touched by his flashlight beam, was the unmistakable shape of a twin-engine Cessna. Elena's tail number was painted on the fuselage, faded but readable. November 725, Papa. David's voice broke. That's her plane. Oh God, that's Elena's plane. After 8 years of searching, of dead ends and false hope, here it was, intact, hidden, waiting in the darkness like a tomb. Sophia put her hand on his shoulder. We need to get inside. We need to see what happened. David nodded, unable to speak. They had to make the opening larger, had to get inside that bunker and find out what happened to his wife on the night she vanished. They spent 2 more hours expanding the hole, working until it was large enough for a person to squeeze through. David insisted on going first despite Carlos's protests about safety. He clicked on his headlamp, took a deep breath of the stale air flowing from the opening, and pushed himself through into the darkness. His boots hit concrete floor. The space was enormous, easily large enough to house multiple aircraft. His headlamp beams swept across the interior, revealing support pillars, storage areas along the walls, and in the center of it all, Elena's Cessna Caravan. The plane looked surreal, sitting there intact. No crash damage, no fire marks, just sitting as if Elena had landed it minutes ago instead of 8 years. The landing gear was down. The propellers showed no signs of impact. This plane had been flown here and parked deliberately. Sophia came through the opening next, then the others. Their combined lights illuminated the bunker more fully. Along one wall were supplies, fuel drums, equipment covered with tarps. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was operational. Or had been. David approached the plane slowly, his hand reaching out to touch the fuselage like he was afraid it might disappear. The cargo door hung open. He pulled himself up, his headlamp revealing the interior. Empty cargo bay. Medical supplies were gone. Whatever mysterious equipment had been loaded was gone. Just empty straps and tie-downs. David moved forward to the cockpit, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it. Both pilot seats were empty. The instruments were dead. No power after all these years. But on Elena's seat was her logbook, open to the last page. David's hands shook as he picked it up. The final entry was dated March 15th, 2015. Elena's handwriting, still crisp and clear on the page. "They're making me land. Armed men on board said they'd shoot Michael if I didn't follow their coordinates. Landing at some kind of bunker. No choice. We'll try to hide evidence of what I saw. Tell David I love." The entry ended mid-sentence. Just stopped, the pen trailing off the page like she'd been interrupted, or dragged away. David's vision blurred. His chest felt too tight to breathe. She was here. Elena had been right here in this seat, writing this message, knowing something terrible was happening. Sophia climbed into the cockpit beside him. "David, look at this." She pointed to scratches on the control panel. Numbers carved into the metal with something sharp. Coordinates. Elena had carved GPS coordinates into her own instrument panel before they took her away. "She left us a trail," Sophia said quietly. "One more location to find." David spent an hour documenting everything inside the aircraft. He photographed the cockpit, the empty cargo bay, Elena's logbook with that final unfinished entry. Sophia searched methodically, looking for anything that might explain what happened after the forced landing. Behind the co-pilot seat, she found Michael Chen's flight bag. His wallet was still inside, untouched. Cash, credit cards, his pilot's license with his photo staring up at them. Whatever happened here, robbery wasn't the motive. Carlos discovered something wedged under the pilot's seat. Elena's camera, the professional Canon she carried everywhere. The memory card was still inside. Sophia handled it carefully, sealed it in a plastic bag. These photos might show what Elena saw, what got her killed. But the most chilling discovery was in the back of the cargo bay. Joao's flashlight caught something scratched into the metal floor. Words carved with a sharp edge, desperate and small. Elena's handwriting again. March 16. "Still here. They're keeping us in another room. Michael injured. They want me to fly for them. I refused. They said I'll change my mind." Below that, dated March 18. "Michael getting worse. They won't get him help. I have to cooperate or they'll let him die." And finally, March 20. "Flying supply runs for mining operation. They watch me constantly. Can't escape. GPS coordinates to main site carved in cockpit. If anyone finds this, please tell David I tried. Tell him I never stopped trying." David's hands traced the words his wife had carved into metal. She'd been alive for at least 5 days after the forced landing. Held prisoner, forced to fly for the people who'd kidnapped her. And Michael, injured and denied medical care, used as leverage to control her. Sophia photographed everything. "This is evidence. Proof of kidnapping, false imprisonment, possibly murder. Terra Verde executives can't deny this." David looked at the coordinates Elena had scratched into the control panel. "She left us a map. One more location." Marco checked his GPS. "These coordinates are 50 miles southeast of here. Deep jungle, no roads, no settlements. That's where they took her," David said quietly. "After they were done using her to fly supplies, after she became a liability. That's where we'll find Elena." Sophia met his eyes. "David, after 8 years, we need to prepare for what we might find. I know." His voice was steady despite the tears on his face. "But I'm finishing this. Elena fought for 5 days. The least I can do is fight to bring her home." Sophia explored deeper into the bunker, while David remained with the aircraft. Her flashlight revealed a corridor leading off from the main hangar, carved into the hillside. She called for Carlos to join her, and they moved carefully down the passage, their lights revealing concrete walls marked with water stains and mold. The corridor opened into a smaller room. Living quarters, hastily constructed. 2 metal cot frames rusted in corners. A folding table with a broken leg. Empty water bottles scattered across the floor. And covering the table were documents, yellowed with age and humidity but still legible. "Carlos, get David and the others," Sophia said quietly. When David entered the room, Sophia had the documents spread out carefully. Cargo manifests, flight logs, photographs. The evidence of Terra Verde's illegal operation laid bare. The photographs showed the mining sites from the air, aerial shots of cleared jungle, heavy equipment, workers stripped mining protected land. Elena had taken these from her cockpit during the forced flights, documenting everything, building a case, even while being held prisoner. The flight logs were in Elena's handwriting, dates, routes, cargo weights. She'd been flying supply runs for them, moving equipment and extracted minerals between hidden sites. Forced labor, meticulously recorded. Each entry showed the same notation at the end: under duress, kidnapped, send help. David's hands shook as he read his wife's desperate paper trail. She never stopped fighting. Even when they had her, she was gathering evidence. João found something else in the corner, a makeshift first aid kit, mostly empty, bandages stained with old blood, and beside it, carved into the concrete wall, with the same sharp implement Elena had used on the plane, more words. "Michael died March 25. Infection. They still won't let me go. I know too much. If I don't fly, they'll kill me. If I do fly, they'll kill me eventually. No way out." Below that, a later entry, April 2. "They're moving me to another location tomorrow. Main operation shutting down, authorities getting close. Overheard them say, no witnesses. This is my last night. David, I'm sorry. I love you. I tried to come home." David's legs gave out. He sat on the concrete floor, his wife's final words carved into stone above him. She'd known she was going to die, had known for days. And she'd spent that time leaving evidence, leaving messages, making sure someone would know the truth. Sophia put her hand on his shoulder. "We have everything we need now. Photos, documents, her testimony carved in stone. Terra Verde can't escape this," but David barely heard her. He was staring at that last message, at the date, April 2nd, 2015, 3 weeks after Elena disappeared. She'd been alive for 3 weeks, and no one had found her. Back at the bunker, Sophia worked on extracting data from Elena's camera memory card using her laptop and portable power bank. The files were corrupted from years of humidity, but she managed to recover most of them. What they showed made David's blood run cold. The earliest photos were from Elena's legitimate flight routes, beautiful aerial shots of the Amazon, the kind of work that had made her reputation. But mixed in were other images, taken from the cockpit during what should have been routine flights. Illegal mining. Sites carved into protected rainforest. Dozens of them, each one showing massive environmental destruction. Clear-cut areas the size of city blocks. Heavy equipment, excavators, processing facilities, and in several photos, close-ups of company logos on the machinery. Terra Verde Resources. Sophia scrolled through the images. Elena documented everything. Coordinates visible in the cockpit, instruments in each shot, dates, times. This is a prosecutor's dream. Irrefutable evidence of illegal operations. The photos from March 15, 2015 told a darker story. Shaky images taken inside the cargo bay. 2 men with rifles, their faces visible. Then photos of the forced landing, the bunker entrance, the interior hangar. Elena had kept photographing even while being kidnapped, hiding the camera, documenting her captors. David recognized one of the armed men from Sophia's earlier research. Carlos Mendoza, former security contractor, worked for Terra Verde's private security division. The other man was unidentified, but his face was clear enough for law enforcement. The final photos on the card were the most damning. Taken during Elena's forced flights over the following weeks, they showed the full scope of Terra Verde's operations, at least 20 illegal mining sites, transport routes, storage facilities, and in one image, a group photo of men in business suits standing beside mining equipment, corporate executives visiting their illegal empire. Sophia zoomed in on the faces. That's Miguel Ferreira, Terra Verde's CEO. And next to him, that's the Venezuelan Minister of Mining. This goes all the way to the top. Government officials, corporate executives, all profiting from destroying protected Amazon land. David stared at the photos. His wife had risked everything to take. She died because she saw this. Because she wouldn't look away. João had been examining the documents more carefully. There's something else here. A ledger showing payments. Bribes to officials. Payments to pilots who agreed to fly for them. And look at this. A list of names marked terminated. How many names? Sophia asked quietly. 6. João met her eyes. 6 pilots over 10 years. The same 6 aircraft disappearances I investigated. They're all here, marked terminated with dates of disposal. Elena wasn't the first person they killed, David said. And based on what we found, she probably wasn't the last. David studied the coordinates Elena had carved into the cockpit panel. The team prepared to leave the bunker at dawn, but first they needed to secure the evidence. Sophia photographed everything, uploaded files to encrypted cloud storage, and sent copies to trusted contacts with instructions to release them if the team didn't report back within a week. The second location was 50 miles southeast through terrain, even more difficult than what they'd already crossed. They moved fast, driven by urgency and the knowledge that Elena's final resting place was close. 3 days of hiking brought them to another bunker, this one smaller and partially collapsed. Nature was reclaiming it faster, the concrete crumbling under assault from roots and weather. The entrance wasn't sealed, just blocked by fallen debris. Carlos and the Silva brothers cleared the entrance carefully. The structure was unstable, sections of ceiling sagging dangerously. They worked for hours, making the opening safe enough to enter. David went in first again despite everyone's protests. His headlamp revealed a single room, maybe 20 feet square. Unlike the aircraft hangar, this place showed signs of hasty abandonment. Supplies scattered, papers water-damaged and unreadable, equipment left to rust. And in the far corner, partially covered by fallen concrete, human remains. David's legs nearly gave out. Sophia came through behind him, saw what he was seeing, and immediately called for Carlos, who had medical training. They approached carefully, documenting everything with photos before touching anything. 2 sets of remains. The first was male, identified by clothing fragments and a wallet found nearby. Michael Chen. David had to call Michael's parents, had to tell them their son had finally been found. The second set was smaller, wearing remnants of a flight suit. Carlos examined the remains carefully, looking for identifying features. A wedding ring on the left hand, simple gold band. David recognized it immediately. He'd put that ring on Elena's finger 12 years ago. Carlos worked quietly, professionally, treating the remains with dignity. Based on the evidence here, he said gently, they died within weeks of each other. Michael first, probably from the infection Elena mentioned. Your wife, he paused. There are fractures consistent with... He couldn't finish. Consistent with what? David's voice was barely a whisper. Blunt force trauma. Carlos met his eyes. I'm sorry, David. She didn't die naturally. They killed her. David knelt beside his wife's remains. After 8 years of searching, of hoping against logic that she might still be alive somewhere, here was the answer. Elena had fought for 3 weeks, had documented everything, had left a trail of evidence, and in the end, they'd murdered her to keep their secrets. They spent 2 days at the second bunker, working carefully to recover Elena and Michael's remains. Carlos documented everything for the forensic investigation that would follow. David sat outside most of the time, unable to watch but unable to leave. Sophia found more evidence carved into the walls. Elena's final messages, scratched with a piece of metal in the days before she died. Dates, names of her captors, descriptions of the mining operations. Even facing death, she'd continued building her case. The last message was dated April 8, 2015. David, if you're reading this, you found me. I'm sorry I couldn't come home. Tell my parents I love them. Tell Michael's family he was brave until the end. And please, make sure these people pay for what they've done. Don't let my death be for nothing. David traced the words with his fingers. I won't, he whispered. I promise. They prepared Elena and Michael for transport, treating the remains with dignity and respect. The trek back to civilization took 6 days, moving slowly with their precious cargo. David barely spoke the entire journey, lost in memories of the woman he'd married, the life they'd planned, the years stolen from them. When they reached Manaus, authorities were waiting. Sophia had sent encrypted files to Brazilian federal police, to international agencies, to journalists she trusted. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Within a week, Brazilian authorities raided Terra Verde Resources headquarters in Sao Paulo. They arrested CEO Miguel Ferreira and 8 executives. Venezuelan officials were implicated, triggering an international investigation. The mining corporation's illegal operations were shut down, their assets frozen. Carlos Mendoza, the security contractor who'd forced Elena to land, was arrested trying to flee to Paraguay. He confessed everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. How Terra Verde had kidnapped pilots who'd witnessed their operations. How Elena had refused to cooperate until they threatened Michael's life. How she'd flown for them for 3 weeks, documenting everything, waiting for a chance to escape that never came. When authorities got too close, when it became clear their operation was compromised, Mendoza received orders from Ferreira himself. Eliminate the witnesses. He'd killed Michael first, making Elena watch. Then he'd killed her 2 days later. David listened to the confession in a police interview room, his hands clenched so tight his nails drew blood. 8 years of searching, of hoping, and this was the answer. Elena had died because she'd witnessed environmental crimes and refused to stay silent. The forensic report confirmed what Carlos said. Elena died April 10, 2015, 26 days after she vanished. She'd spent those 26 days fighting, documenting, leaving a trail for someone to follow, and David had followed it to the end. September of 2023, 8 months after Elena's remains were recovered, David stood in a Brazilian courtroom for the final day of the trial. Miguel Ferreira and his executives faced charges of murder, kidnapping, environmental crimes, and conspiracy. The evidence Elena had died gathering filled hundreds of pages. Her photographs covered courtroom walls. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. Ferreira received 40 years in prison. His co-defendants got sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. Carlos Mendoza, who'd confessed and testified against his employers, still received 25 years for 2 counts of murder. David felt no satisfaction watching them led away in chains. Elena was still gone. Michael Chen was still dead. Justice didn't bring them back. Outside the courthouse, Sophia stood beside him as reporters shouted questions. "We did it," she said quietly. Elena's evidence took down one of the largest illegal mining operations in South America. Her death meant something, but David couldn't shake a darker thought. We found 6 names on that list. 6 pilots murdered over 10 years. Terra Verde is shut down. But how many other operations are out there? How many other companies are doing the same thing? Sophia had been investigating that question. Her latest research showed 3 more aircraft disappearances in the region over the past 2 years. Different companies, same pattern. Last-minute cargo additions, experienced pilots, complete disappearances. It never stopped, David said. Terra Verde got caught, but the model works. Use small planes, remote locations, kill anyone who sees too much. Elena's plane was recovered from the bunker and transported to a museum in Manaus. They made it a memorial, a testament to her courage and the price of witnessing crimes. David visited sometimes, stood in front of the aircraft where his wife had carved her final coordinates, and wondered if her sacrifice had changed anything. The environmental damage Terra Verde caused would take decades to repair. 20 illegal mining sites had destroyed thousands of acres of irreplaceable rainforest. The pollution would affect indigenous communities for generations. But Elena's photographs also sparked something. New satellite monitoring programs, increased enforcement, international pressure on governments to protect the Amazon. Her death had revealed crimes that couldn't be ignored. 6 months after the trial, David received another encrypted email. No message this time, just a file. Flight data from a cargo plane that had vanished 3 weeks earlier. Same region. Last-minute cargo addition. Experienced pilot. Sophia called him that evening. "You saw the email?" "I saw it. Someone's still out there. Someone who knows what's happening and wants us to investigate." David looked at the map on his wall, at the new pin he'd placed marking the latest disappearance. "Are you going to?" Sophia was quiet for a moment. "Are you?" David thought about Elena, about 8 years of searching, about promises made at gravesides. "Someone has to," he finally said. Because the Amazon was vast and full of secrets, and some of those secrets were still killing people. If this story left you with questions, if it reminded you that some mysteries take years to solve and some answers come at unbearable costs, don't let it end here. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We read every single one, and your stories matter to us. Share this video with someone who follows unsolved cases, who believes that every disappearance deserves answers, who understands that behind every missing person is a family that never stopped searching. And if you want more stories of mysterious disappearances, investigations that refuse to quit, and the truth that eventually surfaces, no matter how deep it's buried. Subscribe to Vanish and turn on notifications so you never miss when we uncover the next case. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about these stories. And remember, every person who vanishes leaves someone behind still searching. May we never stop looking for answers. Stay safe out there.